Today, we are talking about special hotkeys in Figma. Now, thankfully in Figma, most of what you're going to be doing, you can find in your toolbar or through right-click menus. But to speed up your workflow, there's a few hotkeys you should know. There's also a few hotkeys that you can't find within the user interface of Figma, and that are arguably extremely important during the design process. Also, thankfully, most of the hotkeys you're going to be learning are very simple and very straightforward. Figma's not Blender, so no fears there that we're going to end up in some deep hotkey keyboard wizard scenario. But today we're going to recreate this little photo grid to practice some of our hotkeys. Let's go ahead and first delete these and get started. Press R to make a rectangle. Go ahead and click and draw, and we can get a rectangle going, but I want it to be the same aspect ratio. I want it to be a square. So while I'm drawing, if I hold down Shift, it will match the size in both the X and the Y, keeping it locked in a square. Now I've got a rectangle that I like. It's a good size. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. We can do that by pressing ctrl D and then moving this out. But you see, this is moving out in a kind of inconsistent manner, right? I want to make sure it's perfectly locked and there's a little gap right here. So to fix that, what we can do is when you're moving an object, if you hold down Shift, it will lock itself to the axes, the X and the Y. And now it won't move diagonally, and I can rest assured that it is paired up both in the top and the bottom with the object that I'm drawing it out from. Now, I don't know how big this gap is, and that's a huge issue for doing design work. Thankfully in Figma, it's really easy to find out. Select your object and then hover over the object that you want to know how far away it is from, and then hold down Alt. When you do that, red lines will appear. Zoom in, make that more evident. There you can see 42 pixels. I can use my arrow keys and we can move this in. Let's go 32 pixels. And now I know that this object is 32 pixels away from this object. I also can hold down Alt and then hover over different objects, and I can see just how far away this thing is from everything else. This is extremely powerful, and you'll be using this all the time. And once again, that is the Alt key. Now let's go ahead and duplicate one more of these. Hold down Shift and drag it out. As I do this, you'll see it automatically snaps. Figma is smart enough to know that, hey, this object is 32 away from here, and you've just moved this thing 32 away from here. Do you want these to snap? And it will automatically align those. And that's awesome. Now we need to make 2 more rows of these. So I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to duplicate them with Ctrl D. I'm going to move these down, holding Shift. And now with all of these selected, I'm going to hold down Alt and hover over any one of these squares because they're all the same distance away. And I want to move these up until it says 32. Perfect. Now I'm going to duplicate one more time. Now you saw that when I did that, it moved them down automatically. What's happening is I moved an object out, and then my next immediate action was duplicate. So if I was to take this square, duplicate it, move it out, say 32. If the next thing that I do is duplicate this, it will move it automatically because it knows that I'm wanting to do that step that I just did one more time. Boom, just like that. If you were to do that, right, 32 pixels, and then do something else like make it smaller and then duplicate it, it still will come across. But if you were to move this anymore, it won't do the snapping. So as long as you don't interrupt the size, as long as you don't interrupt the position of it, it will then move itself one more time. Now that I have this nice grid, I want to make sure that all of these are, let's say, 42 pixels away from the top. Cool, I moved it up 1 pixel, now we're good. Awesome. All right, now I don't want all of these just hanging out right here in my layers. So I'm gonna select all of these and I'm gonna group them together. To do that, I'm gonna hit Ctrl G and I'm gonna name this tiles. And now I can simply click on any one of them and they will all act as one object. So you can see the outline here and then we can move them together. Now you may be noticing all these pink lines. This is actually a relatively new feature in Figma, but it allows you to easily move objects that are in a grid format together. Typically, or I guess I should say, back before they had this feature, in order to move, say, this square down, or if you wanted to move this whole row down, you'd have to grab that row, move it down, grab the row below it, move that, right? You have to manually do all that. But now, Figma knows that these gaps are all the same, and it's created a grid for us. So you're able just to grab an area and expand it, and it will move these automatically, which is super cool. The other really powerful feature is these little pink dots right here. If I wanted to move this square in place of this square, I could just grab this, drag it, and move the squares around so that they snap. Without having to worry about alignment or moving these things, it's really easy to move them all around inside this grid. And you can see right here, it's smart enough to even know that I want to replace that square with that square, which is awesome. Now we've got our grid of objects. I'm going to go ahead and select all of the rectangles inside of here. I did that by twirling down this group and then selecting the top one, holding shift, and selecting the bottom. You also can do that by selecting your group, double clicking, which you can see twirls this down automatically and selects that first rectangle. And then I can select all of them individually by holding down shift and clicking on them. I'm going to use a plugin real quick, which I will cover in another video. But for now, I'm going to just fill these automatically with some architecture images. So that's loading. Boom, cool. All right, we got our images in there. And now we've created our nice grid of architecture images. To recap, we've learned how to check the distance between objects using the Alt hotkey. We've learned how to duplicate objects with Ctrl D. We learned how to group objects with Ctrl G. And we've learned how to move objects on the same axis by moving an object and holding shift. We've also learned that scaling an object and maintaining its aspect ratio can be done by scaling and holding shift. Now, those are the hotkeys you're going to be using all the time. I'd recommend learning them, training with them, and getting familiar with them, because once you have those just in the back of your head, your work becomes so much faster. Of course, there's hotkeys for almost everything in Figma, and you can change what they are, but those that we just went over today are going to be the primary hotkeys for most of your workflow. Moving forward, we're going to learn about components. We're going to learn how we can make designs dynamic and reusable, and we're going to learn about that in the context of this food app. Until then, I'm Max.